Welcome, friends, to today's topic of balance, the United Lodge of Theosophists. From the Bhagavad-Gita. My devotee, who is free from enmity, well disposed towards all creatures, merciful, wholly exempt from pride and selfishness, the same in pain and pleasure, patient of wrongs, contented, constantly devout, self-governed, firm in resolves, and whose mind and heart are fixed on me alone, is dear unto me. He is also my beloved, of whom mankind is not afraid, and who has no fear of man, who is free from joy, and from despondency, and the dread of harm. My devotee, who is unexpecting. In the original, this reads as not peering about. Pure, just, impartial, devoid of fear, and who hath forsaken interest in the results of action, is dear unto me. He also is worthy of my love, who neither rejoiceth nor findeth fault, who neither lamenteth nor coveteth, and being my servant hath forsaken an interest in both good and evil results. He also is my beloved servant, who is equal-minded to friend or foe, the same in honor and dishonor, in cold and heat, in pain and pleasure, and is unsolicitous about the events of things, to whom praise and blame are as one, who is of little speech, content with whatever cometh to pass, who hath no fixed habitation, and whose heart full of devotion is firmly fixed. But those who seek this sacred ambrosia, the religion of immortality, even as I have explained it, full of faith, intent on me above all others, and united to devotion, are my most beloved. Thus in the Upanishads, called the Bhagavad-Gita, in the science of the Supreme Spirit, in the book of devotion, in the colloquy between holy Krishna and Arjuna, stands the 12th chapter by name, Devotion by Means of Faith. And now for today's talk.
Thank you. Friends, good morning. Balance is today's talk. The scale as a symbol has ever intrigued the human mind. In their symbolic teachings concerning the judgment of the dead, the Egyptians depicted the human heart as being balanced against a white feather. If the heart was laden with impurity, life had been a failure. The soul had lost its moral balance. If the heart was light, because purged of its dross by altruism, then life had been a success. Today the evolutionary scales tip up or down with the human hearts being in or out of harmony with nature's all-encompassing purpose. It is a solemn thought to realize that the future course of humanity may depend on a handful of altruists. Who are they? What is their responsibility? Each makes answer for himself. Individually, our safety depends on our ability to keep our equilibrium. To one of sure foot, a pitfall is as harmless as a level path. But how often is it that a petty annoyance evokes the exclamation, "I can't stand it"? The upright position is thus another illustration of balance. When Arjuna, in the Gita that you heard this first speaker read from, Arjuna gave up the fight for his heritage. He sat down in his chariot, and then his teacher warned, "Abandon this despicable weakness of thy heart and stand up. We would like to obey such advice, but often do not know how to obey. So let's look at how one can keep his moral balance. In preparation for the great shocks which all have to meet and stand, it is well if we endure calmly and cheerfully the jolts which daily confront us. Many, involving themselves in huge problems, are swept off their feet. The instability of their private lives has rendered them unfit to cope with world entanglements. Of the 7 constituents of our human constitution, for the human is spirit, which is Atma is the broader definition in Sanskrit. We don't have an exact word for that in English. Spirit, soul, and mind. Desires, which is karma. Physical body, astral body, and life energy, which is our 7-fold nature. The 4th of the desire nature, known in Sanskrit as kama, is called the balance principle. The 3 principles, physical body, astral vehicle, and life energy on one side, and the material and impermanent part of our being on the other, the immortality of spirit, soul, and mind being the higher triad. Serious thought will reveal that upon our use of the middle principles of passion and desire, which is frequently referred to as the lower mind, our ways go up or down. We tend toward the real or the transient. The real, the transient. Permanent, impermanent. We cannot rise ourselves unless the self first asserts itself in the desire to do better, writes Mr. Judge. No matter how much we ask masters for help through lip prayers, group meditation, and whatnot, we won't rise up to the higher realms except through action aimed at altruistic service. Mr. Judge likens our desires to the sign of Libra. The scales is the definition for Libra in the zodiac. When the sun, representing here the real man, reaches that sign, he trembles in the balance. If he goes forward, all is well. If he goes back, all his works are destroyed. Appropriately, the equinoctial storms come in September under the sign of Libra. Analogously, we will have the moral storms to undergo until we use aright the karmic nature. HPB notes that our physical senses are the agents by means of which the astral spirit, or conscious something within, is brought by contact with the external world to a knowledge of actual existence, while the spiritual senses of the astral man are the media, the telegraphic wires by means of which he communicates with the higher principles and obtains therefrom clear perception of and vision into the realms of the invisible world. The Buddhist philosopher holds that by the practice of the dhyanis, one may reach the enlightened condition of mind, which exhibits itself by immediate recognition of sacred truth, so that on opening the scriptures of any sacred book whatsoever, their true meaning at once flashes into the heart. This ability to immediately perceive and react correctly to the real truth is where we ultimately wind up once we are in perfect balance. HPB and others repeatedly stated that unselfishness is an absolute necessity for success in occultism. Or more correctly, development of an unselfish feeling is in itself the primary training which brings with it knowledge, which is power, as a necessary accessory. So it is not knowledge, or as we ordinarily understand it, that the occultist works for, but it comes to him as a matter of course, in consequence of his having removed the veil which screens true knowledge from his view. We have knowledge down here. The basis of knowledge exists everywhere, since the phenomenal world abounds with facts, the causes of which have to be discovered. We see only the effects in the phenomenal world. For each cause in that world is itself the effect of some other cause, and so on. And therefore true knowledge consists in getting at the root of all phenomena, and thus arriving at a correct understanding of the primal cause, which is the rootless root. And that's at that point there is not another effect in its turn. That is the bottom line that we're looking for. To perceive anything as it really is a prerequisite. All philosophy teaches us that the seventh principle is the only eternal reality, while those belonging as they do to the world of forms are elusive to the sense that, in the sense that they are non-permanent or transient. To these is limited the phenomenal world, which can only be taken cognizance of by the sense corresponding to the nature of those principles. It will thus be clear that it is only the seventh sense which pertains to the noumenal world, this one, that can comprehend the abstract reality underlying all phenomena. This seventh principle is all-pervading, so it exists potentially in all of us. And he who would arrive at true knowledge has to develop that sense in him by removing those veils which obscure its manifestation. All sense of personality is limited only to these lower principles, for the personality relates only to the world of forms. Consequently, true knowledge can be obtained only by tearing away all the curtains of Maya raised by a sense of personality before the impersonal Atma. It is only in that personality that is centered on selfishness, or rather selfishness again here, creates personality. They work hand in hand, and vice versa, since they mutually act and react upon each other. Selfishness is that feeling which seeks after the aggrandizement of one's own egotistic personality to the exclusion of all others. If selfishness limits one to narrow personalities, absolute knowledge is impossible so long as selfishness is not gotten rid of. But so long as we are in this world of phenomena, we cannot be entirely rid of a sense of personality, however exalted that feeling may be, in the sense that no feeling of personal aggrandizement or ambition remains. We are by our constitution and state of evolution placed in the world of relativity. But as we find that impersonality and non-duality is the ultimate end of cosmic evolution, we have to endeavor to work along with nature and not place ourselves in opposition to its inherent impulse, which must ultimately assert itself. To oppose it must necessitate suffering, since a weaker force in its egotism tries to array itself against the universal law. All that the occultist does is to hasten this process by allowing his will to act in unison with the cosmic will. So that's our objective too, which can be done by successfully checking the vain attempt of personality to assert itself in opposition to the cosmic will. And since the Mahatma is but an advanced occultist, who has so far controlled his lower self as to hold it more or less in complete subjugation to the cosmic impulse, it is in the nature of things impossible for him to act in any other but an unselfish manner. No sooner does he allow the personal self to assert itself than he ceases to be a Mahatma. Those who are still entangled in the web of the delusive sense of personality and charge the Mahatmas with selfishness and withholding knowledge do not consider what they are talking about. The law of cosmic evolution is ever operating to achieve its purpose of ultimate unity and to carry out the phenomenal into the essence of things. And the Mahatmas, being in harmony with this law, are assisting that purpose. They know what is best for mankind at a particular stage of its evolution, and none else is competent to judge of that matter, since the Mahatmas alone have got to the basic knowledge which can determine the right course and exercise proper discrimination. The Mahatma's only perception is the selfless and unclouded spiritual sense, the power which abstract knowledge alone can confer. We, on the other hand, are still struggling to lift ourselves up to that level through the crowds of material selfishness, to where we can stay on the path of selfless service that the Mahatmas are behind, to the point where we don't have even the least feeling of selfishness, a feeling that clouds the vision of the spiritual sense. To eventually grow to this level, we must keep a vigilant watch of the will to constantly prevent our lower nature from coming up to the surface, which is what it does in our present undeveloped state. Extreme activity, not passivity, is the essential condition with which we must commence. First, one's activity must be directed to check the opposing influence of the lower self. And when that is conquered, one's untrammeled will, centered in its higher real self, continues to work most efficaciously and actively in unison with the cosmic ideation of the divine mind. All this takes a constant effort toward complete even-mindedness, or always staying in balance. As to how the virtues and the vices help us keep or lose our even-mindedness, think one at a time of these items right here: anger, hatred, jealousy, fear, greed, from the viewpoint of balance. Then think of calmness, which is over the side. Calmness, good, will, patience, courage, firmness. In this we get a sense of the scientific foundation for ethics. One fearless voice can calm a hysterical crowd. The insane can sometimes be brought to normalcy if aroused to do something for others. HPB explains in The Voice of the Silence and elsewhere that the virtue called Shila, Shila in Pali, an Indian language associated with Sanskrit, is defined as lack of self-interest or perfect harmony. Perfect harmony in words and acts counterbalances the cause and effect and leaves no room for further personal painful karmic action. But if lacking in the Shila virtue, the pilgrim trips and karmic pebbles bruise his feet along the rocky path. Even bodily health or balance is dependent upon moral attributes. A heart specialist advised the patient, quote, "Try to be cheerful under all circumstances. Unfortunately, you are a moody man, given at times to considerable sadness. Such a state does not lend itself to proper energization of the heart and blood vessels." Unquote. So the heart specialist's suggestion is similar to one given long ago by Mr. Judge. Quote, "Whenever you are feeling down in the dumps, think of some particularly pleasing, worthwhile experience you have had. Your mood will often respond to the thought." Thought is very important. If something comes into your thoughts that you don't like, you get rid of it. When about to flee the field, Arjuna gave this description of his condition, quote, "I am not able to stand, for my mind, as it were, whirleth round. This is no poetic fancy. Psychiatrists know well that one of the first outward manifestations of mental difficulty is lack of bodily coordination, especially in walking. Mental trouble is always rooted in some form of ignorance. Our reincarnating ego needs us to keep on even keel. This sustains and fortifies virtue. Virtue is required for all, according to Mr. Crosby. And we have virtue down there down at the bottom. Good motive may save the moral character, but it does not ensure those thoughts and deeds which make for the highest good in humanity. What is needed in the world is knowledge, he said. The mind perceptions must be carefully weighed. The closer the heart and the head work in harmony, the closer is the individual to spiritual sanity. When they become one, Buddhi united with Manas, which is the higher triad here, to use the theosophical terminology, the ellipse will have become a sphere. Only then do we maintain perfect balance in any position. As food for the mind, consider the doctrines of karma and reincarnation. See how their application to one's life can eliminate fear, arouse a healthy self-confidence, furnish a logical and glorious reason for living, and adequately explain the seeming inconsistencies of life. We will then glimpse the significance of these words of Krishna. And he who is confirmed in this belief is not disturbed by anything that may come to pass. Such an one has sought refuge in the immortal center of his being, the eternal point of balance from which the pendulum of life on earth, with its contrasting pains and pleasures, elations and disappointments, swings to and fro, set in motion by ourselves. He meets the vicissitudes of life at the hub of the whirling wheel of change, where there is no motion and perspective is equal in all directions. It is sometimes asked, what can be done in times of extreme despondency when even the inspiration of a true philosophy of life seems dead? The unfailing power of the spiritual will must be awakened. One can never ride a bicycle if its gaze is riveted on the wheel. One must look ahead, keep the feet pedaling, and balance is assured. So in life. Robert Louis Stevenson wrote, "Anyone can carry his burden however hard until nightfall. Anyone can do his work however hard for one day. Anyone can live sweetly, patiently, lovingly, purely till the sun goes down. And this is all that life really means. This is the true balance and motion required by the ever-moving soul, centered in the motionless self." As for balance of diversities, we know that peace and progress will be borne out in our relations that life provides to us. Peace and progress can only be had by working with people as they are, in the loving sympathy which is itself the key to understanding. The path of emotion is not a route that would lead us to the acquirement of this loving sympathy, which is itself the key to understanding. Emotion of whatever variety is always personal. True sympathy is not that. It does not arise from thinking about oneself, but from a consideration of others in the light of one's own experience and a recognition of the transcendent fact that the oneself includes them all. Real harmony is permanent, not transitory. It does not arise from an accentuation of similarities while ignoring the presence of undeniable differences. Devachan is a pleasant and peaceful state, but personal and transitory. The wise man does not have or need it, since he is a producer of harmony wherever he is. That harmony emerges from a balancing of diversities. When one truly senses this fact, he is already well on the way towards hearing and consciously partaking in the song of life. Straining after harmony does not produce it. Strain only produces strain. The admission that we are all alike, the only difference being the degree to which characteristics are active, provides a fair start, and a freedom from hard and fast conclusions as to the people, things, and methods will carry us prosperously along toward the music of the spheres. Easy does it, but not too easy. It is mostly over non-essentials that we become disturbed. We could be abandoned without loss. In Theosophy as a life, Essentials are few, clear, sheer, and self-evident. The perilous balance of life is no formula, nor a petty annex to the exact sciences. It avails itself of mathematical, physical, and chemical systems. It does not transgress their laws. But law obedient, employing every resource of the inorganic world, it is yet, throughout its length and breadth, as individualistic, versatile, complex, imaginative as creative genius can be. No one can look at an acorn and foretell the shape of the tree to be. What runs in the plant realm runs in the system realms, which the same unpredictable, forward-surging flux, and where the currents or confluent development seems carried far beyond the borders of the mathematical and logical probabilities. Here we are among life's most delicate and inextricable relationships. The fates of living things are bound together, and a wise one can grow wiser learning it. The perilous balance, the dangerous adventure, the thirst, the needs, the crashing in, they are impartially allotted to us all, tall men or taller trees. What we, the living, require is most of all each other. Progeny we must have, company, food, friends, and even enemies. The whole long, vital experiment on earth is symbolic by chains of cause and relation, past glib explaining. Thank you for listening, and attention before we get into questions and answers. On June 2nd, we have a meeting sponsored by the Philadelphia United Lodge of Theosophists titled Ancient Myths for the New Age. It will be Saturday, June 2, 2018, 1 to 4:30 p.m. at our lodge in 1917 Walnut Street, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. For more information, check their website. It's 215-563-4692 is the phone number. And next week's talk is on silence. And after this meeting, we'll take a short break and have a round table commence on the Bhagavad-Gita. So with that, I'll open the floor for questions and answers. Yes?
My question is regarding the purpose of finding balance in one's life. Is it individual, or it transcends more to a universal purpose?
It starts individual.
It starts individual.
Yes.
Okay?
You have to make the first step. Internally, we all have this potential within ourselves. We have to learn to use that potential. And as we learn to use it, we grow, and we keep getting better balance, up to the point where we reach up and automatically do it, if you will, when we get in this triangle. Eventually, it could take eons of time,
So
but we have to keep working at it.
our mundane actions and conquering our passions and desires transcends to the spiritual? Like, let's say I from being an angry person, I achieve calmness. Will that transcend?
Yeah, as we develop, this gets to be I think we have to get into this a little bit to properly answer your question. First, we have to have the desire. Nothing will happen unless we have that desire to get better at whatever we were trying to get better at. To do that, then we have to think about, okay, impersonal, selflessness, when we get all of that together eventually, okay, then this transcends, yes, up to the spiritual level. If we keep that desire active and indomitable will, we get to a point where we get help along the way. The student's understanding is that attracts the attention of the masters, and they help you along in that process. But they can't. They won't do your work for you. I understand they can't do the work for you. We have to do it ourselves, and know intuitively that we are. Thou art that, it said. We have all that potential within ourselves, and we have to call on that potential.
If I can add, in terms of anger and calmness, we here sometimes use the analogy of the higher self being the sun, and it's always shining. And it could be a cloudy, choppy waters, and if you become calm, then the light, the higher self can reflect better, easier. So in a way, that's, we're doing this so that the higher self can reflect in the lower self. That's another.
I think, yeah, I get it. I mean, when you are working in the higher self, at the highest level, okay, then we're partaking. It's said that we are sort of like a alabaster vase at a highest level, okay. We are the container, and Atma shines in on us, okay. So we participate directly in that. So yeah, we have direct perception at that point. That's the difference between, if you will, perfected one and one who is not perfected yet. And we have to keep reaching up for that. And we only not, it's not a selfish thing by trying to improve ourselves in that way, because every time we make a step forward within ourselves, we help everything around us. And we must do that in order to advance humanity. It's, according to the material standards, it's an immense period of time, but we as individuals and as nations and internationally, that's how it's done. And we eventually do go to the golden age, and we do it more quickly and less painful. So that's our challenge, and that's our responsibility, and we have plenty of reason for hope, but we have to carry out our responsibility to achieve that goal, which is an ever-evolving cycle. As we learn more, we can do more, and as we do more, we advance humanity, and it keeps going. It's phenomenal when you think about it. So where we're headed if we try and keep trying. Well, with this we'll close then, if we don't have any more questions, and we'll commence again on May 27th with the topic of silence. Thank you for joining us, which is